Hey guys, Delaney here. Today I'm going to talk about how we care for our lambs and how we do what I call health checks. Now, I made a semi-video last year about this topic where I actually show me and my husband doing the health checks. This was before I was heavily doing YouTube. It was sort of a test video to see what I wanted to do and what I wanted it to look like. Is this possible? Could we do it? How does this work? How does the videoing work and the editing work? And anyway, it was a big kind of test run to see if I could do it. It was a lot hotter. The tech that I was using was not as good as what I'm using now. So it's gonna look a little different than my normal videos where I'm just kind of sitting here talking. But there is some really great footage of seeing me and my husband actually doing these health checks and having me out there walking you through what we actually do. So I think it's really important to include in this video, and that's going to be sort of the highlight of this video is sort of me introducing it, and then we're immediately going to be out in the barn doing the actual checks. So let's go ahead and jump right in, head out to the barn, and you guys can see how we do our lamb health checks. Hello and welcome to Ewe and Me Creamery. Today we are actually going to do a full health check on our lambs. We have their name. We're going to tag them with a number. This is HT, which is hoof trim. They're young enough to where they probably don't need a hoof trim, but it's on the chart anyway. FAMACHA score. FAMACHA is 1 to 5. You want a number 3. Anything below or above 3 is kind of something to be worried about. And then we have a WC, which is a weight check. I'm going to check their weight and give them a score. TM is a tick meds, so we're going to give them some tick med. Dewormer, because these are our babies, they're more susceptible to worms and parasites, so we're just going to give them their first dose, and we'll see how often we'll need to do that. That will be determined also by the FAMACHA score. When it's 2 or 1, then we definitely need to deworm. And then we have shots, and so once a year, our adults get a CDT shot. It's called Barvac CDT, and they get that every year, and it's their booster, basically. But when they're little, when they're about a month old, they get their first shot, and then 2 weeks later is a booster, and then from that point on, it's every year. So again, we have our names. They all now have numbers. We just kind of numbered them based on who we grabbed first. And so that's why the numbers aren't in like specific order. They will be in the chart that I make like on the computer. We did look at all their hooves. A few of them could have used a trim, but we were so busy focusing on everything else, we just decided, you know what, we have to do the CDT booster in 2 weeks, and we won't have to do everything else because, again, we do that every month. So, like, we'll check their weight and their FOMACHA scores. Obviously, every time we have hands on them, we like to check that, but we won't have to do like everything. So the next goal is in 2 weeks we will do the hoof trim and the next CDT shot. We won't have to do worm. We shouldn't have to do a tick meds unless we see the ticks are really bad. And then we'll just overall just give a good hands on them to see if anyone's losing weight or has a big parasite load. This is the bucket that we used to do everything that we wanted to do on the chart. And so I'm going to go through and explain kind of what we use, why we use them, and show kind of the two things that maybe go in conjunction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick them up and I'm going to show you what we use and why. We use a syringe for the tick meds, which is the Permectin CDS. Between their shoulder blades, you separate their wool and you squirt it onto their skin, and just for like a little section in between their shoulder blades. This is a drench syringe. This is something that we stick in their mouth and then we push the medicine in. We call it CDT. It's Barvac CDT, so it's a little bottle. A lot of times you can get a bigger one for cows, but for sheep, this tiny one works really great. It is an injectable, so we use a syringe with a needle. Like I said, you do it once, and then in about 21 days, you can give them their second booster, and then you don't have to do it again for another year. What we also use is we use the rubbing alcohol to disinfect. So we disinfect their arms before we give them the shot. We have the pen that I use to mark. The other thing we have the tags, and then the tag applicator. What you do is you take the back from the bag, stick it onto the hook. You pull the number, which we ended up with 10, so this would be the next one. You undo that and put it there, and it's super easy, and then you just put it on their ear and you clip it. This is the scale. I'm not sure where the sack went with this, but this is the scale this is the scale we have to weigh them. We have a yellow thing that hooks on here, so you hook the bag under the lamb's tummy and then weigh them, and it tells you how high they are. And last but not least, we use their hoof trimmers. They trim the hooves. Every year you come into not so much problems, but things you're like, you know what, this wasn't as smooth as we'd like it to be, so let's do our best to like tighten it up for next year. So this year actually went super smoothly versus the last few years. I don't really like doing the needles, and so it was been kind of traumatic every time we do anything medical or health checks, because when it came to the needles and actually having to give doses, I really freak out. It was a psychological thing. It was just, I hated needles. I have hated them since I was 10. I've had to get pricked pretty regularly since I was 10 due to medical reasons, and so I kind of built a fear of needles that I've worked through when it's like blood drawing from me, but there was a lot of still, I think, some baggage, some trauma from needles that I had to work through when I was actually giving shots, because it was more traumatic for me than I think it would be for most people. So every time we do it, it would be tears, it'd be freaking out, it'd be, oh my gosh, I'm doing it wrong, I'm gonna kill them, I'm gonna do, it was a mess. And this year was actually the best we've had with me giving shots. I still hate them. Like, I still have to mentally get over the fact that I have to give them shots. And so during those times of like intense shots and like having to do needles and stuff, it's been really traumatic for me. And then there's this big break and I'm like, oh, got this, it'll be fine. And then we have to go back into it and I still freak out. So I'm not saying that I was completely perfect this year, but I definitely am better than I was, and I feel like I'm finally getting into like, okay, I can do this, I can do this. You just have to stay calm. And one of the things my vet said, which was freaking me out for a while, but she's like, it's just something that sheep have, is that sheep will have what's called abscesses. I'm probably saying that wrong. But it's when the shot gets like blisters, and it'll get like a lump and a bump, and like it will just cause, it looks like you hurt them, which is not the case, but she's like, yeah, sheep just have a tendency to have those, whereas I thought I was doing things wrong. So it was nice to have the vet go, it's okay, you know, this is just kind of, sheep are more prone to this than like say cows or pigs or stuff like that. So I was like, oh, okay, so it's not the fact that I'm horrible at this. It's the fact that, you know, they're just more sensitive. I was like, okay, well, that makes me feel a little bit better. And then the other thing I didn't realize, and this is one of those moments where you look back and you go, I am an idiot. Like, why didn't I think, why didn't this like click in my brain? And it was the rubbing the shot after. We'd give the shot, I would do like a gentle rub, and I thought it was like a pain thing, or like, you know, the blood things at the doctors that sometimes they'll rub it a little bit to get the blood to like stop bleeding, so it would like coagulate or something. That's what I thought. And it wasn't until this last little bit that I was like, oh my gosh, they rub the little bump that happens with a shot to spread out the medicine. And my husband just looked at me like, well, yeah, didn't you, like, isn't that what you were doing? And I can't tell you how many times people look at me and go, well, yeah, I thought you knew. And I'm like, no, I didn't. Like, why would anyone think this? I'm not raised on this. How would I know this? And so I'm actually starting to, like, rub the shot afterwards correctly, which has been, like, a huge game changer, and one of those, like, I can't believe I didn't realize this. It's okay. But anyway, I'm getting better at it, and you know, it just takes practice, and it's something that I still don't love doing, but it's something that I am able and capable. And this last little bit that we just did with the lambs has made me feel a little bit more confident, and so much like, oh, okay, maybe in a few years, like, I can actually do this and not have any of those things. It'll just be like second nature, which would be really nice. Now, I hope that gave you a really good view on how we do our health checks on the farm, whether it's for lambs or for our adult sheep. We do health checks more heavily during summer when the parasites are a bigger problem. We don't do them as much during the winter because we don't have to have any of those kind of issues because they're mostly on hay. The parasites really kick in when they're out on pasture. Health checks are a whole lot easier to do with lambs and with milking ewes, because for the milking ewes, I have hands on them morning and evening, so at least twice a day I am with them and I can really take a look at them. Usually I'll just take a quick look while they're on the stand. I'll just check their eyes and their back and just make sure that everything looks good. The lambs are a little easier to handle when they're smaller, or if they're bottle babies and we have them in our lambing nursery area. That's sort of a dog run that we converted into sort of a lamb nursery or a chick growing. It's our baby area where we just have a lot of babies, and it's smaller and it's contained. It's a lot easier to catch the lambs when they're in there versus like when they're with mom. The boys, which is our normal 2 adult boys, but also any lambs that were bottle babies but that are now on pasture, which we usually keep the young babies with the adult ram and his wether. When it comes to that time of the year, that's a little harder to do regular health checks because it's just harder to catch them all. And it's also hard for me to grab the boys. The boys are a little bit more feisty. They're not as well trained, and they just have a little bit more weight to them, so I need a little help. So for the milking ewes, I do check pretty much every week, but for the boys, we try to aim for every other week, but it depends on our schedule, and it depends on how easy it is to catch everybody. Sometimes I need an extra hand, whether that's a friend or my husband who's only available on the weekends, and if we have stuff going on the weekends, sometimes we have to push it back a little bit further. If our sheep are not looking great and the parasites seem to be really getting to them, then we have to do extra health checks just to make sure that they're not slipping. When it comes to their weight or their what's called FOMACHA score, where you check their eyes. But these health checks are really important for us to do and to just make sure that we have eyes on all of our sheep on a pretty consistent basis to see if anyone's looking rough, or we just need to amp up our dewormer system or process. It really kind of depends on the year. Some years there's a lot more parasites and there's struggle with that. Sometimes there are years where there's more like coccidia in the soil and we're dealing with that. So it's kind of a toss-up, but their reaction to whatever's happening out on field will determine how often we check them and how frequently we have to round everybody up and do any deworming. When it comes to our lambs, we really start to do our health checks at about a month because that's when they need their first CDT shot. And then 2 weeks after that, they need their booster. And then from that point on, we don't really need to have hands on them except for monitoring the parasite load. The lamb checklist looks a little different than our adults because we don't need to tag, and the CDT shot is not every month, it's once a year. So it's adapted as the year goes on, but for the most part, this is our system. This is how we do our health checks. I know for me, health checks were something that took me a while to figure out, and I misunderstood a lot of things, and it caused some issues short term because I didn't know what I was looking for. So if you do have any comments about anything that we do when it comes to health checks, put them in the comments below so that I can respond and hopefully get a bit of a better understanding of what we do. If you like this video, give it a good thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified the next time we upload a video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!